energy.
When John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960, the face of America was much different than it is today. The best example can be seen in the faces of our current president and his family. But how will the nation look 50 years from now, and why is it important? With the help of our corporate partners at USA Today, we're able to offer a glimpse into the future.
The Diversity Index is a tool to measure how diverse or different the people are who live in a given area, to figure out how likely is it that two random people are going to be different.
The National Diversity Index has surged from 20 in 1960 to well over 50 today, and it could top 70 by 2060. Here in Gwinnett County, Georgia, just a few miles outside of Atlanta, the Diversity Index is already at 71, meaning anyone living here today has a 7 out of 10 chance that the next person they meet will be different from themselves.
One lesson that nation can take from Gwinnett County is that diversity is coming, it's inevitable.
This Southern transformation is taking place where not that long ago, separate and unequal was a way of life and enforced by the scare tactics of the Ku Klux Klan. Layla Slowinski is the executive director of housing. She says after a period of white flight, county leadership is now using its diversity to attract international business.
Well, just recently, Dasan Machineries, located here from South Korea, they created a $30 million investment. So there's something to be said about what the minorities are bringing to this community. They're creating jobs.
Vast changes are also happening in public classrooms. According to projections by the Education Department, this year, for the first time, non-Hispanic whites are in the minority.
Are you good?
This collision of different cultures and races hasn't always been smooth, as witnessed in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Over the last decade, the Minneapolis suburb has seen a substantial number of Somali immigrants.
Please.
Just a few years ago, the school district received a huge backlash from the community when it decided to redraw boundaries to make the schools more equitable for students of color.
With any change in community and any change in schools, you're going to have a few people who are still vocal or upset about things, and that's part of big changes like that. It's such a positive piece for our students to be in a racially diverse and diverse population, because they do learn those global competencies.
But change isn't coming fast in every corner of the country. In fact, if you want to see what the nation looked like in 1970, just drive around Idaho today. And Maine is one of the only places in the country where the population, as well as the diversity, is actually shrinking. How do Americans feel about its changing face? Take a look at these poll results by USA Today. Almost half, 49%, say we're better off as communities continue to diversify. 25% said the country is worse off.
Lots of people hope that with the election of President Barack Obama, not once but twice, we were beginning to move toward ushering in a post-racial era where race didn't matter as much, and where anybody of any background could rise and succeed. However, we're still looking at incidents like the unrest in Ferguson, Missouri. So it certainly points to a climate in which we still don't really know enough about each other. It's time to really begin a national conversation about how we all move forward together.
I want to welcome everybody to You and the Podcast Show. We're streaming live on Facebook Live. Today, we've got several guests that's going to be joining the podcast. I am one of the co-hosts of the show, Chief Green, and the other co-host of the show goes by the name of Chief Swag. How you doing today, brother?
Get it right, man. What does it say on the screen, bro?
Chief Swag 1. Man, where did the Chief Swag 1 come from?
Hey, look here, man. I refuse to acknowledge you until you call my name right. It's Chief Swaggy 1, man. All
Chief
right?
Swaggy 1. Chief Swaggy.
You got that? Oh, you got that, bro?
Yeah, I got it. So
man,
we've got a very distinguished guest that is joining the podcast today, and he is Dr. Ricky Jackson of the Norman Police Department.
I take the doctor part off, but I take the other part of that department. Ricky Jackson.
Hey, we've got Deputy Police Chief with the City of Norman, Ricky Jackson, who's joining the podcast today, and hopefully we've got another guest, Timothy Campbell. We can get him on the podcast up on the screen. So today, guys, we're going to be talking about the changing faces of America, and I think this is a topic that goes to everything that's going on around the country. And, looking at this topic, it is how does this topic, involve policing in the 21st century?
So, Virg, we talked about the changing faces of America, and Ricky and I talk all the time, man. We have some really, 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 really deep conversations about this, man, and the changing face of law enforcement. And I will tell you that we are seeing more minorities join the department, but we're still seeing and feeling that good old boy environment or culture in policing. There are still individuals who believe they can say what they want to say. There's still individuals that believe that if you look like us, we shouldn't be in these positions. And if you look like us, we were given these positions because we are African American. So, the change in face, we really did think when President Obama was elected in 2008 that we would see some changes when it comes to racial divide. Unfortunately, man, we were not 50 steps backwards in 2016. And I just really think at some point people are going to begin to realize, man, it's going to be extremely difficult to climb out of that hole. It really is. And so, it's, are there some things that we experience that my kids aren't having to experience? Yeah, there are. But I think we recognize them more because we've been through them in the past. And so we recognize the macroaggressions and the explicit biases more than some of our kids do. So that's why I wanted Tim on. You have two different generations. You have the baby boomers. Rick, you and I and Virgil are baby boomers, and then you have a millennial who is a man. This young man, I think when the listeners hear what he brings to the table, just like what Ricky brings to the table, they are going to be amazed at these two gentlemen. So that's just my 2 cents worth.
All right. Well, hey, Mr. Campbell, glad you could join us for the podcast show. How you doing today?
I'm well. I'm reporting. I just got here, so I'm just coming in and just enjoy.
Okay. Yeah, I think we kind of have a little audio problem with the art. So, but kind of let introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us what you do around Little Rock.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. That's better.
Okay, cool. So my name is Tim Campbell, Rock, UAPB graduate, a proud UAPB graduate, also a humanity. To ever shine, gold boots is Omega Psi Phi Incorporated. I've done a lot of activism as far as community engagement, as far as leadership, as far as like helping our community unpack and heal, right? Which is the most essential. I serve on a few local boards. I serve on the City of Little Rock's Racial and Cultural Diversity Governor's Task Force in 2020, reviewing police policies and things like that, where I gained a relationship with the chief and everything. So I'm out, right? So I'm just happy to be here and engage in a conversation because I think it needs to be heard.
Yeah.
Hey, Virgil, hey, Rick, and to the listeners, he's being very, very humble, man. This young man is currently, he's about to graduate, if he hadn't already, the Bill Clinton School of Policy, which is right on that same level as Harvard or Yale or Wharton Business School. He's in that program. Man, this is a dynamic young man. I'll tell you, he just got one fault, and that's purple and gold. Other than that, man, he is the man.
Well, hey, man. As you know, the other guy with the other color hat on, he is, for some reason he has to bring that up on the podcast. So
It's just innocent. It's just innocent pride.
Yeah. So today, we're going to be talking about the changing faces of America, and there was a video that played coming onto the podcast, and some people will probably say, the video said that Barack Obama was the president. Well, we know that that video was something that was from 2015, but one of the things, guys, I saw recently was where in the state of Pennsylvania, you've got a community that is changing, and you've got people who are in a generation who don't want to see those changes happen. And they are fearful that their communities are being taken over by Latinos, Blacks, or Somalians, or people, or Asians. And so their family businesses that have been around for 80 years are closing because of all the other diversity that's occurring in those cities. And that's something that's happening across every 50 states, in the United States, and every community. So, but, then on the law enforcement side, you have people who will call in the police because there is people that are in their neighborhood and they feel like they don't belong in their neighborhood. And now you're seeing confrontations between law enforcement and the Black community because somebody has said that you don't fit in this neighborhood while you're here. And so how does law enforcement respond to the change in diversity? And something else, I shared a picture of a group of women on my LinkedIn page, all Black women in law enforcement. And Keith, there was a guy who said, "Where is the diversity at?" He was a retired police chief, and he said, based upon this picture that had all Black women police officers in this picture, where is the diversity?
Well,
so Rick,
what I think about that, man, that goes right in there with reverse discrimination. It's always something when a person believes that their sovereignty or their hierarchy is being destroyed, then it becomes that they're the victim. So, where's the diversity? Well, African American is an ethnicity, and it also is a minority, and it is diverse. But then it comes down to like reverse discrimination. So it comes down to the fact of when I feel that I'm not a hierarchy or belong to a hierarchy anymore, then people are trying to attack me. People who seem to be who've earned jobs and who've earned the status, positions of status now, they haven't earned that, or they're adversely affecting me because I'm used to being in that hierarchy. So that's what he meant. I mean, sometimes people just say stuff, man, just to be saying something. Man, just be quiet. You ain't got to say nothing.
Yeah.
I would say in the early intro, and Keith, when you mentioned 2016, there was a huge wing as far as the attitudes in this country. I would actually go back when President Obama was elected. And when President Obama was elected, where this country was going, which was why we got the pendulum and swing in 2016 when that president came in. he empowered and emboldened certain individuals to express things. He gave them the power to do that outwardly and vocally and loudly. And see, so it's been going on. 2008 ushered in a whole lot of fear and anxiety. Deep here, it was the same. I always like to compare the two because some of the things you went on when you first got here, you recall some of the emails and comments they made when you got this position, the city of Norman, right? So you were seen a certain way, and it brought up a certain regional and community fear from those in our community. We've never had this before, and of course, there's always a struggle of you having to define your legitimate. Of course, you can't be qualified for the position. You have to have gotten it because of your skin, which of course that bore out not to be true, to a lot of people here. So yeah, there's the changing demographics across the country, and what it does is to light the fire on the certain sentiments and thoughts and this divisiveness now that's always been here, but 2016 kind of brought it out to express certain thoughts, ideas, and sentiments.
Yeah. Well,
Back off what stated. It's funny that part of the day they also want to be a part of the diversification, right? And it's like they want, but when it comes down to the detriment, we talk about the school to prison pipeline. We talk about who's getting the biggest chunks of money for the society. We don't like the hierarchy is they are the prime beneficiaries of that. Diversifying and really mixing the pot up. It's kind of like they want to be a part of that as well. What my generation is not gonna allow to happen is have both, right? I think my generation is very much so. We will hit those streets, and when anything feels uncomfortable to us, we're gonna express it, right? Whether talk Facebook, Instagram, my generation is like, nah, we're gonna address it, right? But I think something that I would like in terms of this conversation, if I will add, is that I think that my generation, the symbolism of progress, right? What it looks like, things like changing the teeth on ice cream. I think we're there, right? But as far as really understanding policy, education piece behind policy, I think that's where I would like to see my generation stand, because when you talk about Obama in 2016, my generation, I know for me in 2016, right? And it was a big thing, to have a president, not just my skin color, but, he was from Chicago, and it's just whole of what I thought America was overnight. But I don't think that my generation, I think we were of what Obama did for us, that I don't think we actually delve deep into and looking to learn policy, right? Looking into political justice and not just voter education, voter registration, and things of that such. So that's a piece going forward as it relates to the conversation of the dirty conversation.
yeah. So you bring up a good point about your generation, and as we talk about the changing faces of America, are there often conversations about what took place during the civil rights era in the 60s and 70s about how the faces of America looked then compared to how they look now, and the fact that now we've got the world of social media where you can put out instant information, and there was an era back then where, as we know, that didn't exist. So, is there any type of relation to what's going on now to what took place back in that era?
I think that I do see similar. However, I think that my generation, when we were in the '90s, I think we Panther type of thing. I think that's what I heard my parents talk about. For the movement, right? The overall movement, the Afro is another thing. A lot of my friends, we're like, um, we appreciate Martin Luther King, right? But I think when my generation got a hold of Malcolm X, and who think that you know, I've heard a celebrity call us Malcolm's kids because I was a person that was left out of history that I never learned about. I never learned about who he was. I remember I probably seen a picture of him, but I couldn't tell you who he was by the time I graduated high school. But I knew that Emmett Till started, the death of Emmett Till started the civil rights. I knew all these, but when it came down to actually, I guess the verses, it was just civil rights, right? We didn't hear a lot about John down in what, Selma Bridge, right, and the school protesting. We never really heard about the diversification. We never heard about the black little actually on the bus before Rosa, right? But she was very, very young at the time. Like, yes, civil rights does play a part, and it does come. But I think my generation is more so Black Panthers, Black Lives Matter. And I'm teaching a group of kids now at the law school for summer, and they're 13, 14. They know only about Trayvon Martin, right? They only know about Martin King conversation. Their generation is, oh, what happened to Trayvon Martin, right? That's where they come in. And so, wow, he's way down the list of events for African American history, right? That's why, so that we can go back and know what happened in the Reconstruction era. You ask them what is Reconstruction, they probably could tell you, right? We can tell you what Black Wall Street was, but as far as people during the Great Depression, what happened to Black people during the War II, probably couldn't tell you that, right? Because
Okay.
I know my grandfather, he's Korean War, but I don't really know the struggles he had as an African American soldier. So we're more so, Black Panthers, that whole pride, thing in the 80s, and next thing we knew, we was gangbang era, right? Late 80s, early, and so a lot of my friends know more about Williams activism when he started writing children books and things like that. We are very versed, but as far as civil rights, I think that we could do better.
Yeah, Tim, we're having a little audio problem with you. You kind of a little choppy, so I don't know if you're on your cell phone, but we can you're kind of in and out, so hopefully that'll kind of clear up a little bit.
Okay.
So guys, one of the things that I want to bring up, when we talk about the changing faces of America, how does that, Rick? How do you think that relates to the Black community? I mean, when we just heard him talk about a generation who may only know about Trayvon Martin, they may know a little bit about Martin Luther King because it may have been something they saw a poster of or something during Martin Luther King holiday. Is there something to be said about the changing faces of America in the Black community and how we need to continue to educate this new generation about the Medgar Evers, about the Malcolm X's that took place in a generation that they were not they know nothing about.
So there's a saying that those that don't know their history are doomed to repeated, the history, how we got here today, to understand that the basic, that's where you start. You have to understand the root before you can, the root of a disease before you can fix it, right? Talk to a few individuals, and not just, Black people in my community, but the younger individuals in my community, and a lot of them have no taught it in schools. I will tell you that a lot of what we're seeing and reading today, we weren't taught it. And Tulsa's, 100 miles down the road from me, and it wasn't 5 or 6 years ago I ever heard of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And I'm from Oklahoma, as it happened from me. See,
Wow.
So we were intentionally kept ignorant of these things, but now it comes to educate ourselves and to learn the things of the past, because that will give us, that will guide strategies moving forward. As I read on the Medgar Evers and Mountain, those leaders of ours that were assassinated, to understand that era and the times that they, the rights that they didn't have, and the fact that you every day there's a target, you're not going to make it home. You may not make it home that night. You know that your days are numbered, and they all three of those their days were numbered, right? And but still to go forth and do what they tried to do, and to begin to tell you, how remarkable that was. They talking about what we wouldn't do and would do and all of that, But these guys lived it. They knew it. They have one on their heads, and they knew that that at any given moment it would no longer it would cease to exist. Brothers, in the community. So I got to tell you, history we have to know. We have to understand it. I had a conversation with one of my officers once, and telling me about, basically, Black people, we got to get over what happened. But that happened back then. It's not happening now. And I explained to him that you're not going to see it because it's not. For people who look like me, we have skin. We have skin invested in the game, right? We have a dog in the fight. Us. And so we don't have the luxury of being culturally blind about the things happening to people who look like us. You tell me that as a Black man, I should forget the things that happened to my people because it makes you uncomfortable. Well, that's rap. You turn around and say that we ought to remember things like Confederate statues because that's history. And then I asked him if he understood why the Civil War was fought. He said, well, he wasn't big. He didn't know much about why the Civil War was fought, and which of course his belief was, and so he said that no, it was fought to the South and all this other stuff. And I said no, it was fought because the South wanted, and the South additionally wanted to keep people who look like me in bondage. They wanted to preserve the institution of slavery. That's totally ignorant of that. But he had all these thoughts and ideas that contradicted history because he wasn't taught. So, history is very, very important moving forward. If we don't know our history, how we got here and how to chop it off at the root, kill it at the root up.
Yeah. Well, and we've got a comment from one of our listeners, Nikki, who says Black history was one of her electives in college. And I guess the question, are the young people not going to college with that option? I mean, that's a good question to ask. You don't know. I know if you go to Langston University, you're definitely going to get a lot of some Black history there. But is that something that occurs at a OCCC or at a UCO or Oklahoma State University or any other university around the United States? Is that something that if you don't get it in high school, do you get that part in college? But Keith, I have to say also, I think when we talk about this is also something that your parents should have some you're not going to learn everything at school, but what are you learning at home from your parents?
Well, I want to say this, man, and Ricky, please chime in on this. I do know that the African American student government at the University of Oklahoma is very, very strong. They do have an African American Studies program, and so it has one, and so that's that doesn't happen at all schools, but there are one. I know Texas Tech has one.
Yeah,
as far as they have teams, but what I will say this, man, I think that as parents, you're right. We have to be real with our kids, and we have to talk about the struggles, the past struggles and the continued struggles. The more you hide from your kids regarding history, the more they fall victim of what's going on today and thinking everything is just perfect and things. So we have to keep it real, and we kept it real with our kids. We had those discussions. Our kids went to private school, but they can tell you anything you want to know about Black history. They can tell you anything anything you want to know about our family history and the civil rights activists that were in our families and things like that. You have to have those discussions because you know what? Look what that knucklehead in Oklahoma has done as the governor, and look what in Florida, and look what in one in Texas, where in these other states that are forbidding schools to teach Black history or critical race theory. And critical race theory is it's not teaching violence, it's teaching the history and the facts of the nation of what happened from the point we were brought over here. And so, when you want to hide that history, and the next thing we got to fight for that stuff. And we can't just assume that someone else is going to fight for it. It's no different than we assume that our vote doesn't count.
Well, Keith, you mentioned something about, one of the things I want to say is that it's upon, our parents to, if you're not getting this information, whether it be in elementary, junior high, high school, we've got to be able to talk to that, have those conversations with our kids as well. So it is, again, I think there's a lot that young people are missing.
Yeah, Ricky, I will tell you, Ricky and I, being in Norman, when I was in Norman, Ricky and I were asked to participate in several community meetings involving the African American Studies program at the University of Oklahoma. And it's really interesting, some of the topics that we had, and you'd be surprised still how many kids they really don't know, kids that really don't understand what they're fighting for. But at the same time, that's why I'm thankful to be able to work with this gentleman that's on the podcast tonight, Chief Jackson, because he and I had some really deep conversations, and we were able as a team to combat some of the things that were going on in the city. Not all of them, but we were able to get on top of that stuff and teach a lot of his. We used Ricky calls them teaching moments.
Yeah, indeed, and of course the whole shift here, and moving forward, even after Keith left the city of Norman, he and still continue. I mean, and that is, of course, building trust with our community when it comes to lives, the police and our community about what law enforcement is about, and people that are marginalized in the community, what they are about as well. What I have found, we talk about the changing face of America, the changing face of the country. As law enforcement is concerned, we too need to evolve, to address. Gone are the days where you have police going into long gone need to be the days where police and the only thing that those residents and those people see in that community is for, right? So to change the culture, you start with your officers. You know, you lead by example, educate them about, you know, who you serve in the community, right? Who your clientele is in the community. Some of the service-based business, and those in our community, regardless of whether or not black, white, you know, they're our customers in the community. And so you start shifting the mindset of officers, you know, heavy-handed, you know, trying to arrest a way out of problems in the community, in it policing type strategies, where you actually go in and try to fix permanent basis, you know, and that is building trust. The first component of that is building trust and legitimacy with those in your community. And we strive to do even today, you know, it was something started by when Keith, you know, Keith took the city of Norman Police Department. He took that strategy to a whole nother level. And so we are building upon that level. You know, I will say today that the officers that I deal with today, you know, are not the same ones I dealt with almost 40 years. You know, we have a lot of these young men and women are very professional, you know, they're very service oriented, you know, and they'll put their lives on the line to save a life, regardless of race, color, creed, religion. So it's paying off. The things that Keith started when he first got here pay off in dividends to those in our community, to where we're, you know, we have a much safer community because officers now have a different lens, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you know, Rick, you know this. I mean, you spent several decades in Norman, and I've told this story. When I moved to Norman in 1989, I was looking for a house and was looking out on the west side of Norman, just west of the mall, off of Main Street. Talked to a realtor about leasing a townhouse, and we just spoke over the phone, but we never had met in person. And so when I get there, she answers the door and she has this look on her face like, you know, what are you doing here? And I tell her, hey, I'm here for the 2 o'clock showing of the townhouse. And she looked at me and she said, you know, this isn't for lease. And I'm like, well, you're the lady I talked to. And she was like, no, you've never talked to me before. And then I run into the young lady who worked in the office at the old Albertsons over on Robinson. And she said, you were the guy who came in and was looking at the house. And I said, yes. She said, you know, I had no idea that and her name was Velma Barnes. She said, I had no idea she was a racist, just such a racist like that. And she said, she came back and said, you know, we don't lease to people like that in West Norman. And so, and I'm just like, wow. And so then I run into JC Watts later at the Walmart, and you know, it was kind of like, hey, are you at the university, or you know, you have to have been somebody either with a good job or something to live on the west side of Norman. And so as we talk about the changing faces of America, Norman is one of those cities that has had its history of dealing with the changing faces that has taken place in the city of Norman. And Keith is a good
Yeah, there was
example of that.
And of course, when I started back in the mid '80s, I remember that there was a comment that on the west side of Norman, the way you do it with people on the east side. I said, "Oh, really? Why not?" And it said, "Well, because on the west, bankers and, you know, people with money and all of that, and the east side, they're not nearly as affluent, and so there's a wider criminal element, a higher criminal element on the east side of the town." I said, "Well, you know, you police people equitably and respectfully. It doesn't matter, you know, what side of town they live on or what side's their house. You know, that's got nothing to do with how we put." That was how you did it. West side, you know, was treated a certain way, and you didn't have to. And so it took a few years to change that. on the policing side, and so
I can't tell you
you're
how many
exactly
times
right,
I was
Virgil.
pulled.
You're exactly right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I was pulled over driving a dealership car, and they wanted to know why was I driving this car with a dealer's tag on it, and I don't need to explain to you that I work at a car dealership, So that was and that was the mentality of Norman Police Department back in the late 80s, in this instance, 1989, 19, and even in 90s. Uh, so yeah, I think it was a shock when Keith was brought in as the first black police chief in Norman, and so and I'm pretty sure he had some knowledge of what he was walking into and how that changed the faces of Norman Police Department.
Well, let me say this, man. I appreciate Ricky. Man, I love you. You my boy, Virgil. You're my boy, and I will tell you that stuff still goes on too much in law enforcement.
It does.
I transitioned over to my last department as recent as 2022. That type of discussion was taking place in briefings or one-on-one discussions with supervisors and young officers. That you have to be heavy-handed in this area and not in this area, and you got to watch how you kind of handle this part of Little Rock, the west part of Little Rock, and the Heights area of Little Rock, because those are the people who have the voice and pay more taxes. Well, it doesn't matter if you pay 8 cents of taxes, whatever, you're a taxpayer, and so you don't treat people differently. The other thing is when you talk about the changing face of America. Let's talk about it in law enforcement. It's still, you still can't have the discussions regarding diversity without it causing some type of uproar. Faces becoming red, votes of no confidence, people believing that you are racist. I put out an email regarding some things that I saw one time during the George Floyd riots, George Floyd protest. And I actually saw a department that was segregated. And it was blacks on one side, whites on the other. So basically you had two separate groups. You had a blatant display of segregation. I put out an email regarding my disappointment in that. And one of my top executive assistants who will scream reverse discrimination in a heartbeat, basically said that he didn't appreciate my civil rights email. These are the type of discussions that are still going on, the type of resentment and the type of pushback that are going on. You're just supposed to let it go. These things, and this is in law enforcement. These are things that you should just let go. Those things happened a long time ago. You're not supposed to remember that the first African-American assistant chief's office was a broom closet. You're not supposed to remember that. You're not supposed to talk about that because those are bad things and it causes bad. No, it's history. And it causes young men and young women to see that they're the people that fought through their struggles. Why it's important for us to take up that fight. That's what these things do. It's not supposed to be stifled. And so the changing face of America, we're seeing things and we're seeing people who look like us in positions, but that's not enough. We still have the struggle. And no one knows our struggle, but people who look like us. No, I don't. You don't know my struggle. No matter what, you can't compare the struggle of another ethnic group compared to the African Americans. You just can't do that. I can't compare my struggles to a black female. I can't compare my struggles to that. I know what my struggles are, but I don't know what's. So I see the struggles of African American females, but I can't say I know exactly what they're feeling because theirs is different. It's the same. It's a struggle, but theirs might be different. So we have to be careful saying that we understand because everybody's struggle is different.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think, when we talk about this topic, the changing faces of America, we saw what happened January the 6th during the insurrection, how you've got a group of people who don't want to see America change, and they're going to do everything they can to, uh, in their minds, try to prevent that from happening. And so, uh, again, you see it in law enforcement, you see it in society in general, um, and sadly enough, you see it in the education side, because in that piece that we watched, prior to the podcast show, up in Minnesota, where I am now, there's this city, Eden Prairie, which is a very obviously affluent white suburb of the Twin Cities. Uh, there was a lot of pushback from that school district, making sure that they were more inclusive and that there were more diverse students attending that school district. And you saw the pushback from that. And so, I don't think people fully understand how that really impacts a lot of people of color, whether it's Latinos, blacks, or Asians, that, hey, you don't have a choice in where you want to go to school at. You don't have a choice in where you want to live at, because we don't like the way the faces that are moving into these communities.
So, Virgil, there was an incident in Texas, and Coppell, I believe it was Colleyville, one of the high schools over in the suburb of Fort Worth. And there was a vice principal who was fired, or his contract was not renewed, based on the fact that he brought up the term of critical race theory.
Yeah.
About Black history.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have parents there who are just angry. I mean, there were situations where there was actually people who almost came to blows over the teaching of Black history. And so, are the faces change? You would think in 2022, but let's go back to our profession, and I'm just going to throw two words out there to you: Fox News. when Ricky and I talk about, let me just say this: pretty much in every police department in the nation,
Fox News.
I know the ones that I've been affiliated with, and Ricky knows what I'm talking about. In briefing rooms, Fox News is on. Not only is Fox News on in briefing rooms, Fox News is on in the offices of executive police officials and supervisors. And it's not on just for morning or afternoon, it's on all day. And so when you have that type of, when you sit down and that's all you listen to, of course you're going to be resistant to change and changing in the faces of America, because you believe in that nonsense. Everything is a conspiracy theory. Everything is, when you have people like Tucker Carlson and others that put out there that that minorities are taking over, and that if you don't look like a minority, you are going to be exiled and you're going to become extinct. Those things help. Those things don't help the changes in America and help us in being a stronger melting pot. Those things don't help us. And so now combine that with law enforcement, who has a lot of authority, and people have that mindset. That's why it's different. That's why it's difficult for the faces of the America to change and embrace diversity. That's why, because you have that pushback, and you have that platform such as Fox News and other extra conservative platforms. That's why it's difficult. And Ricky and I had this conversation about that. So, that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about critical race theory, and you mentioned what's going on, in Oklahoma and Texas and many other states about the people, they're trying to make sure that this is not taught in schools. I think, I think it, for us to have a podcast to really look at what is critical race theory, where did it come from, and why are people so afraid of it? Is a whole nother conversation to have, because when you look at it and the more you study about it, this is more of an academic conversation than it is, hey, you want to make sure that kids in elementary school are not taught about critical race theory. But I just don't think people are really educated enough to know about it. But you've got a class of people who have painted the narrative that how dare you teach my kid something, or make them feel bad about something that happened to black people in whatever decade it took place.
If you can minimize what we learn in our educational level, then you won. And so that's one of the things I think that we need to be concerned about is why do you want to minimize education, certain areas of education? I mean, why is that? I mean, isn't it a positive thing to learn different things? Why do you want to minimize that and stifle any kind of history, to learn any kind of history? So I don't get it.
Yeah, so we got a comment from Robert Johnson. The truth must come out. No one in Minnesota knows about the KKK float at the U of M parade in the 30s. So, you know, and again, I think when we have these conversations, you know, we hear about things that people never knew anything about. You know, like Rick, you were mentioning about the, you know, the Tulsa Race Massacre, and even black people in Oklahoma didn't really know the full story behind the Tulsa Race Massacre. And then when I went to Arkansas, people really didn't know fully about the Elaine, Arkansas massacre.
All those events started based on the facts that you had prosperous African American communities and that they were overthrown, and there was some sense of entitlement, and those areas were devastated, and based on the fact that they were prosperous and we didn't know our place. We had stepped out of line, and that was the only way to show we needed to get back in our place. That's what those were about.
Yeah. Well, you know, Robert replied back. He said, "I'm a white guy, but the history hasn't been taught correctly." You know, definitely thank you, Robert, for your candor about. And there again, I think there's a lot of people, you know, both black and white, who understand that history just hasn't been taught correctly, as Robert stated.
Pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and then they cut the straps and pulled off the stolen boots. So I mean, across the country for centuries, you know. Then the question is, well, why can't you guys pull yourselves out of that? Why about, you know, what you don't have and how you're treated in the society and so on and so, the history of this country and the systemic racism that was intentionally put in place to keep us in our place.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey guys, we're coming up on the last few minutes of the podcast, and I want to apologize. We got some type of background noise that we're trying to figure out where it's coming from. But you know, Rick, we want to definitely thank you for taking the time to finally come on the podcast, man. After 2 years, Keith, it took this brother 2 years to get on the podcast.
This is on a Thursday night meetings. They go on, and Keith can attest. Our council
Absolutely
meetings go on till the wee hours of the morning. Now, an hour, 2 hours. Yeah.
Hey, Ricky, Virgil knew that. He's just trying to. He knew that, man. We've had that conversation before.
Trying to stick it to me.
Hey, but you know what, Ricky, you know, before, you know, man, we would be remiss if you did not tell our listeners something about yourself, man. You are Black history.
About what?
Tell them about yourself. You're Black history. Tell them you are Black history, and tell them about your your career and things like that in Norman.
Well, I was hired in 1986, which made me the third Black hired here, and then the only one that's ever promoted internally, and through all the ranks. Like first Black lieutenant, first Black captain, major, and now deputy chief. And then my brother Keith came in and made the first Black here in the city of Norman. However, I would be remiss if I didn't state that you ride on each other's shoulders, you support each other, and you mentor each other. And Keith provided me an opportunity. I can tell you right now, once I'm past lieutenant, I probably wouldn't have gotten another opportunity to promote until it's possible I could have, but when Keith came on board, brought some tools, and he had that mindset that as you go up, you bring up, and I continue that legacy here. Be they Black, brown, or whatever, white, green, whatever, I will bring up quality of these leadership roles here, to help move this agency forward and help improve our relationship with our lot of guys here that can do that. So props to Brother Keith. He started a legacy that we've got another Black officer that's a process for promotion for lieutenant, and he'll get his opportunity. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm ecstatic to see where this agency goes. And again, Chief Humphrey, when he came on board and brought in some new ideas and a new vision, and
Well, Rick, as you know, there's some good in the gray haired dude over there, man.
They'll go up there. Yeah.
So guys, I want to kind of wrap the podcast up. Rick, we definitely want to thank you. Unfortunately, we didn't get Mr. Campbell back on the podcast, so we're gonna have to get you guys back on again and have another good conversation about what's going on in America in policing. So again, guys, I don't know where this background noise is coming from, but
that's that Minnesota internet, man.
No, it's not that Minnesota internet. So
that's what that is, man. That's that Minnesota internet. Ricky, you ain't having those problems, are you?
No, sir.
I'm not having those problems, man. That's that Minnesota.
Yeah. So definitely we want to thank Robert. We want to thank Nikki and everybody else, and Norris for joining the podcast. And if you missed any parts of this podcast, you can definitely check it out. The rebroadcast, it will be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many other podcast platforms. And so we want to say that we will definitely be back again next Thursday for another episode of You and the Law podcast. So stay tuned, and we'll see everybody next Thursday on You and the Law podcast.
Love you, Ricky. Love you, brother.
Love you, brothers. Yep.
Thank you.
Be safe.
All right, Bird. Love you, Bird.
All right, bro.
Oh, you don't love me, Bird?
I love you, man. I love you, brother.
All right, bro. All right.